Okay, so I'm going to go over a couple things in this video to help you better prepare for your proposal. And it's going to kind of be in two different categories because you have two assignments with the proposal. So as I've always told you in this class, everything's sort of layered into each other, and I try to do that to help you reflect, make adjustments, and then hopefully turn in the best final draft that you can. So this week that we're in right now, you're supposed to be working on your proposal, and I've given you some things that can help you sort of get ready for that proposal. And then Monday of next week, on July 1st, we will start doing the peer review process. And since this is summer and since July 4th is next week, I try to arrange it so that the peer review sort of takes place in the first part of the week, and then the review part of the peer review is not due until the end of the week. That way, if you do have 4th of July plans, or if you have to work because you're in a service industry or something, hopefully I've given you that little bit of space in the middle of the week so that you're not stressing. So the proposal was sort of spread out over a couple of weeks on purpose, so that you could kind of manage that. So I hope that has made sense along the way. So next week, also, in addition to the peer review, I'm going to review your work to try to give you some feedback on your organization for the proposal. The proposal is sort of the final big thing that you're going to do this summer for English 112. So it sort of shows how you have sort of progressed through the topic and then researched and analyzed and done all the things, and then now you're going to make the final proposal about your topic. So in addition to the peer review next week, you're going to be giving me an outline. And the outline hopefully helps you complete and polish the proposal. So we're sort of doing this thing in pieces, and a lot of students don't quite understand this because they're not writers and they haven't done a lot of writing with the process. Hopefully you were introduced to that in 111. And then we continue it in 112. And honestly, you should always use the process writing model for writing well. And that just means you sort of come up with the thought, you develop it, you get some drafts going, you polish those drafts, and then you end up with a final product. Rather than that old way of doing things, you probably might have just written it once, turned that in, and you thought, hey, that's good enough. But even professional writers go through the process of writing. They develop an idea, they sort of do some exercises to get it polished, and then they do multiple drafts to further polish it. So the reason why I'm explaining that once again is because that's sort of what this outline is meant to do, which is not due until next week, but I'm going to start with that explanation, and then I'm going to end the video going over a student sample just to point out some key things that I think may help you succeed with the proposal. So I've loaded a couple of student outlines for the proposal. These came from last semester. And I thought these were pretty good. I gave a couple different types in here, different topic types, and then the students handled it differently. So this is sort of what we're looking for next week. So this is one student, and as you can see, I'm allowing for the MLA header just because it's easier. I'd rather you spend your time formatting the outline than formatting the cover page. So we're just going to keep it simple with an MLA header, but don't forget the page numbering because that's part of MLA and APA. They're a little different, but you have to include it. So if you notice this student, and you do have the option, this student chose to represent the introduction with an A, B, and C subsection. That's not typical for an outline. Usually with an outline, you'll just have the Roman numeral 1 and then the word introduction, and then you'll move on to Roman numeral 2. You don't usually give a lot of details for the introduction. But I'm giving you the option, if you prefer, to go ahead and sort of write a lot of these things out and sort of outline them out, so when you write your proposal, everything's sort of shaped for you and planned for you, that's fine. And so this student chose to do that. So as you can see, they represented A for the attention grabber, and then wrote a sentence for that, and then represented some transitional sentences. I always call those transitional sentences because you're really transitioning the reader from a very broad point about the topic where you've tried to get their attention. And any good writing gets the reader's attention because you don't want them to just leave. You know, just like any good host, you want to properly welcome the reader, and you want to sort of get them interested in what you're writing about. So then the B section is the transitional sentences, and this is just a model for any good writing. You should start out broad and then narrow it down. So this student chose to actually write out the transitional sentences. And then finally, the claim comes last, and that's also good writing, to make sure the thesis or the claim comes at the end of the introduction. And that way, you've sort of narrowed it down for the reader, and they'll be able to sort of get the message of what's to come, and it's very specifically laid out for them. So this student chose to do the A, B, and C subcategories for the Roman numeral 1. Some of you may have practice with outlines, and some of you may not. A formal outline does require Roman numerals, and there's a certain formatting for this. So with these student samples, I've already given you sort of the pacing and the formatting for this. So you could really take one of these student samples, they're already in Microsoft Word, and you go ahead and use this formatting that's already in place for you. Also, in Microsoft Word, there are templates for outlines, but just make sure that you have the Roman numerals, the capital letters, and then if you have any subcategories, it goes from capital letter to number. So make sure you're doing a formal outline. There are examples of outlines in your textbooks, and so, you know, just if you're not used to it, make sure you reach out for those supplemental resources. So this student chose to do it this way. It would also be acceptable to just have the word introduction and then move to the second Roman numeral. So here we see that this student is going to represent some background information in the proposal, and I think that's a great way to organize, because you're knowledgeable about your topic, but your reader may not be, so it's good to sort of summarize some of the key points, educate the reader a little bit on your topic, and explain some things to help them understand the main issues and the main examples that you provide later in the essay. So the student did some background. Then we sort of get into the main part of the proposal, which is the solution. So remember, I've said all semester you're going to research a topic, and then you're going to figure out some issues within that topic, some problems and things that need to be fixed, and then you're going to create a claim to show the solution for that issue. You're going to sort of solve a problem. And solving problems, sometimes it means building a building or financing something. But also, sometimes a solution is just a change of approach or a change of thought. So, however you've chosen to show your solution to your issue, it does not have to be something physical, as in building a building or financing something really expensive, because businesses don't have a lot of money sometimes to spend on rehauling the whole thing. So you have to think about that. Would it be feasible to spend that much money that would be needed? Buildings are millions of dollars, even for small buildings. So you can't really propose, hey, we're going to build a complex that's $100 million, because that's probably not feasible for most companies, most industries. This can be true too with like some equipment for health care. Like, you can't say every office should have a certain level of equipment, because sometimes small offices couldn't afford that. So you just have to consider those things. But change of thought or change of perception or change of approach to an issue sometimes can be just as effective. And small changes are okay too. So I've just encouraged you to be very specific, and I've encouraged you to be reasonable with your claim statements. The other thing is, your claim does not have to be original, because a lot of good things are going on in the world, but maybe every facility doesn't utilize that. Or maybe there's a philosophy or a theory on how things should go well, and maybe it's been tried in one hospital, but maybe other hospitals should use it. Or maybe there's an educational theory that some classrooms use, but it would be great if all classrooms use that theory. So if you found some research of something that worked a certain way, then you could maybe propose that it should be a universal method. So one example is in Finland. I think they're ranked as like one of the largest or best educational designs in the world. People study Finland education systems. And in the Norton Field Guide, there is a article on that, and I just know that because I teach 111 and we studied it. But then a lot of people in America are looking at how Finland does their school system and how they do their educational philosophy, and then they're trying to implement some of those ideas into the United States method of educating. So that's just an example of how you can take something that someone else is doing, maybe it's not widely utilized or implemented, and then you can propose that it should be something that should be considered as the norm. Hope that makes sense, or hopefully that eases your mind on your claim statements. Then the student went on to argue the feasibility of the claim that he was making. And notice how he was very, very specific in his outline, and that's okay. I'm really having you use this outline as a polishing method to make sure that everything's fitting, and to also show me sort of a preview of your proposal so I can make comments on it. And then notice that the concession refutation is coming just before the conclusion. There are several schools of thought for the concession refutation. It should always be included in a proposal or an argument or persuasion, because that's just the model of good academic argument. So what that means is you're going to concede one thing, maybe two things from the opposition. Any good argument includes a concession of some sort to show that, yes, you do understand that there could be a problem with the claim, there could be a problem with the position, because there are always two sides to any argument or any issue. There are always two sides. You can't really argue fact, and that's one of the reasons on some of your claim statements I've made comments to you to say, you can't just claim a fact. That's already true. So we're sort of theorizing or claiming something that should be utilized or should be used. So with your concession, you're going to want to look at the opposing viewpoint for your claim. And that's also a good way to test if your claim is a good one, because you should be stating one side that you're claiming, and then we should be able to know that there's another side as well. So the concession is you're going to always show one, maybe 2 points at the most from the opposition. You don't want to do the whole opposition, because that would be more of a comparison contrast. But you're going to show the reader, show the audience that you are well-rounded and that you're academic and educated, and you are able to see that there is another side to the issue. Then the refutation is when you come in and you sort of refute that side. So you go ahead and state the opposition, what you understand to be the opposition, and then you want to bring it back to your side of the argument with the refutation. So this can be done in one paragraph. Like I said, this is not a comparison contrast, so you don't have to spend a lot of time on the opposite view, but you do want to show that you're aware of it, that you understand it. However, it is best to believe in your side of it. So a quick example is, years ago I had a student. She wanted to go into education. She wanted to be a special ed teacher. She started out the semester and she wanted to argue that mainstreaming, meaning that a student with a learning disability should be mainstreamed into the traditional classroom and not be segregated into a special education class. She argued that she wanted to research, and her claim was going to be that students with learning disabilities should not be mainstreamed into traditional classrooms. The more she researched and the more she investigated the other side, she realized that the research really did show that students with learning disabilities should be mainstreamed, that they improved much more quickly and better if they were mainstreamed into traditional classrooms, even if it was for part of the day. So by the end of the semester, when she did her proposal, she sort of flipped, but she had seen that both sides both had viable research. She just sort of, the more she read, realized that maybe her view was not what she believed anymore. So by the time she wrote her proposal, her claim switched to students with learning disabilities should be mainstreamed, even for part of the day, into traditional classrooms. Well, then she already had the built-in concession, which is that some research shows that some students do better in an isolated classroom for most of the day because, there are certain things with anxiety or things that may not have worked for them in the traditional classroom. So I thought that was kind of interesting that she switched, but that just shows you that there were two sides to that issue. And then the refutation, again, should come back to refute the opposite side. You should always bring it back to your side of the argument, and you should have a few statements to show why, even though there is another side, another viewpoint, that your position is the correct one, or should be considered the more strong and viable way to look at the issue. Okay, so after you concede and refute, then you're going to go to the conclusion, and you want to restate your claim statement. You want to remind the reader what they just read, and don't do the exact same claim statement, just rephrase your claim statement. Then again, you want to get in some transitional sentences, so you want to broaden out those sentences, broaden out the idea, make it less specific. And then you want a final point, and the final point should just emphasize what you want the reader to go away with, their understanding of the topic. So the student shows how they're going to do that. So this is a good one. I'm going to get out of this one, and then I believe this last one here, I think it was the second student. There was one in here I wanted to show you. That's not it. This student also chose to write out the sentences, and that's fine, but I think one of the samples I gave you, the student just put introduction, and that is acceptable if you want to do it that way for the outline. Okay, so here it is. This student chose to just put the claim above the outline, which was fine, and then he or she decided to just represent the introduction with the word introduction. This is more the classic way of outlining. The introduction and conclusion traditionally do not have details. They just have a position holder to show that there is a paragraph there. So this student chose to just put the claim and feature it here before the outline started, and that's fine. So you can do it either way, but you do have to show me the claim statement in your outline, whether it's in a detailed subtopic list under the introduction Roman numeral, or if it's up here. So I would just say look through the outline, see what works best for you. Another thing you'll notice with this student, I believe this was a female student, she was not super specific about her points in her outline, and that's okay. Your outline really should be used to pace your work and organize your work. With proposals, there are a lot of things to fit in and a lot of organizational points that you have to incorporate. So it's, I would say make it your own. I'm going to grade these but I'm mainly looking to see, did you format it properly? Did you use the Roman numerals? Did you use the capital A, B, C? And then as you notice, the student had some subcategories to her concession, and she had a 1, 2, and 3. So the formatting goes Roman numeral, capital letter, numbers, and then if you have any sub categories under the numbers, it would be lowercase letters. And you can look all of this up in your textbook. You can also probably just go online and see what a traditional outline looks like, but these are good examples. And everything has to be lined up. If you notice the way it's formatted, you just go right up under the previous line. So it can't just be all over the page. It has to be very organized. So as long as you present an organized outline with the traditional formatting, I'm really looking for that. And then I'm also looking for an opportunity to give you feedback on the organization of your paper, your claim statement, all the little things along with your peer review next week that I can help you so that you can finish up the proposal strong and have your best polished work and get a good grade. So that's sort of the purpose of the outline, is to help you organize, but to also give me an opportunity to give you some feedback. So the other thing I want to point out with this outline is this student chose to put the refutation concession first, and that's okay too. So previously I said, there are different ways to approach the refutation and concession. I sort of personally like to see it at the end for most proposals. I think it's good to establish your own argument first, and then at the end sort of bring in the concession to show that you understand both sides. However, sometimes you'll have a very controversial topic, and you don't want the reader to read through your whole paper and the whole time be thinking, well, doesn't this person know that this other side exists? Or they can't get it out of their mind that these little issues should be handled with the opposing viewpoint. So this particular student she wanted to be a vet, and she had researched the idea that spaying and neutering certain size dogs was not a good idea before the age of 2. I think is what she came up with as her claim statement. So she had found that research showed that spaying or neutering larger dogs at a younger age could cause health problems later. So her claim, as you can see, says that she thinks educating the public about spaying and neutering for large dogs will allow pet owners to make wise decisions about the age at which their dog is spayed or neutered to prevent future disabilities and health problems. So she had a really interesting topic. But I'm a dog owner. A lot of you probably, I think we've all established that a lot of us are pet owners. And so spaying and neutering is very important, but she's sort of arguing something that's a little different than what we've all been taught, because most of us have been taught to spay and neuter when the animal is younger. So she decided to do her refutation and concession first so that she could sort of do away with any doubts dealing with her claim. And I thought that was a great decision. It's not wrong. Like I said, my personal opinion is for most proposals that the concession refutation comes last. But in her case, and for a lot of controversial topics, it really probably should come first, because you want to sort of get any of those doubts out of the reader's mind before you convince them for your side of the issue. So that's something to think about. Another way, which I'm not a fan of at this level of writing, but it's something you may do in future classes, you can also, if you're doing some sort of persuasion argument type of writing, you can integrate the refutation and concession points in with your body paragraphs. And that's not wrong to do that, but I really think at this point in the game you should keep it separate, because if you're not accustomed to writing persuasion or argument papers, it's really easy to sort of shift into that comparison contrast mode, and you're trying to make everything equal. So I really prefer that you either put it first with the refutation or concession, or put it last. And that would mean, when I say first, I mean right after the introduction and sort of background setup for the paper. You could go ahead and refute and concede the issues, or after you've proven your point at the end before the conclusion, you could go ahead and do the refutation concession. If you have any questions about that, you're welcome to email me and I'll answer the question. Or if you're not sure about your topic, you know, you can email me, or when you turn in your outline, there's a little note area that you can leave me a note. So when you turn in your outline, you could tell me, hey, I struggled with this. I wasn't sure where to put my concession refutation. What do you think? And then that might help me to see like what do I think about the positioning of that. But anyway, so these are just some outlines. Again, I alluded to this in this week's announcement, and I just want to go over this so you could know that this was coming up. And that'll be due next week as well. So, the other thing I wanted to look at with you guys is under the student samples, I wanted to just show you a quick student sample of the proposal. And I'm not going to go step by step through this, so don't worry. I'm just going to show you a few things. I think the student samples are really a good tool to utilize, and it just shows you what a good polished one looks like. So here's just another example of a cover page. Make sure the running head and the subheader is on the first page and that it's different than the second page. A quick tip, because I know it's such a headache to set this up, a quick tip is to format it as a page number and not a header. So when you go in to insert, you would want to go to page number and set it up that way. I don't want to mess this up, but you would just go, do that one, but then you're going to back up and go ahead and do the header. I have found that that works better than just doing the header, because it just doesn't seem to want to work. It's like you're always having to go back and fix it. Then you're going to want to do a different header on the first page, and just your subheader. After the cover page, just your subheader is going to appear. There's a little box that you can click when you set up the page number, and it'll say different header and or different first page, and you just click on that and then you can change it. All right, don't forget your abstract. I would not put too much worry into doing your abstract. Just remember, I'm sure you've read other abstracts. As you read your scholarly research, they usually come with an abstract. All an abstract is a short paragraph summary of your work. You're going to want to do this last, because you cannot summarize work that hasn't been written yet. So even though it comes first in the order of your proposal, I would write the proposal first and then go back and write the abstract. So when you're building your proposal, maybe just put the title abstract and come back to that last, because your abstract should be a summary of the actual paper, not a summary of your topic, but a summary of your proposal. So I just always advise students to do that last. It's a pretty easy thing to do. Once you've written your paper, all you have to do is just summarize it. So one of the mistakes that this student made is he did not put a title. So don't forget, on the first page of your essay in APA, the title goes here, and the student forgot that. So like I've said all along, these student samples are A papers, but sometimes you may see a mistake. So I did want to point that out to you. All right, so those are a few things that I wanted to point out. The other thing I wanted to point out, let me see if I can find a good quote in here. One of the things that I'm noticing that some of you do is you just want to drop in a quote and you don't have any phrasing with it. Dropped quotes or dropped in quotes are not satisfactory writing for college level. I know in high school sometimes they allow that, but you have to remember, in high school or middle school, they're just trying to get you to use the quote. They maybe don't have the time, or that's not the emphasis for that lesson at that point in your life to teach you how to write into the quote. But at college level, we expect you to write into the quote. A quote should never sit alone as a standalone sentence. So you have to sort of give the reader sort of an introductory phrasing into the quote. So this particular student wrote, "The article from Washington Times provides an excellent perspective on this matter, semicolon," and then the quote. That's a little bit of a cheat because he didn't really phrase into it, but it's satisfactory because he did provide some introductory language into the quote. Let me see if I can find another one. Here's a way that he did another quote. He writes, "In addition, these features can become," and then he goes straight into the quote. And that's a great way to do it. He used the exact phrasing for what he felt like was important, and then he phrased into the quote. You can also do phrasing like "according to Dr. Smith," comma, and then Dr. Smith's quote. Avoid using speech terms for written work. A lot of you have been using the term talks or says when you're introducing a quote or an idea, and that you can't do that because your reading is something that was a written text, so don't reference it as spoken text unless it was an interview that was spoken. But those are just a few things. Notice all through this that there are in-text citations. You must have in-text citations to match the references sheet. I will be reviewing your work, so I need to see where that quote originated, and it has to tie into your references sheet. So if you would not include in-text citations, you probably would not pass this assignment because that's a key area of emphasis for research writing. Okay, I'm sort of scrolling through this. I think this is something that you need to sort of do. There are several examples, and you should just read through those to just see how these students have represented their work. I wanted to show you the references sheet. You should have the word references. It does need to be on a separate page. And whenever you're thinking about page count, the references sheet and the cover sheet and the abstract do not count for page count. So if it says 4 to 7 pages, that means for the actual part of the essay, not the additional pages that you're required to include. This student did a great job with formatting, with the exception of the hyperlinks. So as you notice, the student included the hyperlink, and he should not have done that. So I think you can take out the hyperlink just by right-clicking, and I don't know if it's going to let me do it. Let me see if I can do it again. I don't think it's letting me do it because I've got it in here as a sample. Anyway, if you just highlight over the hyperlink, right-click, and then it'll let you take it out. Okay, the other thing on the references sheet, make sure it's in alphabetical order. That is a formatting requirement. And make sure you're using these hanging indents. This is formatting 101 for both MLA and APA. I see a lot of you not having the hanging indent, and you'll lose points over that. If they have a DOI, make sure you use that in place of the URL. DOIs are becoming more common, and a lot of times you'll have that as a choice. So if you do have a DOI, use that instead of the URL address. Okay, so again, I'm not going to read this essay to you, but I did want to go over those few little points, and I'm going to close out with just a couple of tips. When you're writing for academic writing, always include a topic sentence, and this is for any essay you write, but always inform the reader what the main idea for that section is. So don't ever start out with a quote, and don't end a paragraph with a quote. Quotes should be in the middle of the paragraph because that's the support of the paragraph. So if you end a paragraph with a quote, you're sort of ending it without explaining the meaning or the reference, the proper reference for that quote. Also, if you start with a quote, you really haven't set me up to understand why you included that quote. So start off with the topic sentence and then use your quotes and your examples, your statistics, your examples in the body of the paragraph. Also, don't just drop in quotes. Like I said, set it up, explain, phrase into it, and then finish the quote or finish the statistics or whatever the example is that you're using. It doesn't have to always be a quote, but finish that with an explanation. You're the one writing it, and as I evaluate you, or as anyone would evaluate you for academic writing, we want to see how you're tying it in to your claim statement or to your thesis statement. So set it up, give the actual point, which can be a quote or a fact or statistic or whatever, and then explain that to make sure it ties in specifically with your claim statement or thesis statement. And if you do that, you'll have a really good final product. If you have any questions, please let me know. I check my email daily. It is summer, so I'm doing things just like you are. I'm working and I'm enjoying my family during the summer, but I do check my email at least once a day, if not several times a day, and then I try to respond to you when I see the email. So don't hesitate to ask questions. I want you to do really well on this final big paper for the semester, and I look forward to reading everything. Thanks a lot.